In the mock battle, Jake pretended to attack, and the villagers skillfully countered, demonstrating the techniques they had learned. Their movements were fluid and confident, and for the first time, Jake felt like they were truly a team. The crowd roared with applause, and Jake's heart swelled with pride. As the demonstration came to an end, Jake called for a break. The villagers, flushed with excitement and accomplishment, gathered in a circle, catching their breath. Lyra stood beside Jake, grinning widely. That was amazing. They really came together, yes, Jake replied, filled with adrenaline. This is just the beginning. We can inspire more villages to join us. Imagine what we can achieve with even more allies. Lyra nodded, eyes sparkling with determination. We should invite other villages to train with us. Together, we can become an unstoppable force. After a short break, Jake addressed the crowd again. Thank you all for being here today. Your strength and courage inspire us. We must continue to grow stronger and unite against our rulers. Together, we can reclaim our freedom. The crowd erupted in cheers once more, and Jake felt the momentum building. They were no longer just a group of villagers. They were a movement, a force that could challenge the oppressive rulers. As the day turned to dusk, Jake watched the villagers mingle with the visitors, sharing stories and laughter. The atmosphere was filled with hope and camaraderie, a stark contrast to the fear that had gripped them just days before. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the crowd. It was one of the leaders from a neighboring village, an imposing Zorathan named Kelos. He approached Jake with a serious expression. You have done something remarkable here today, Kelos said, his voice low. I have seen the potential in your villagers. We want to join you. Jake's heart raced. Really? That would be incredible. Together, we can make a real difference. Kelos nodded. We are tired of living in fear. If you can unite the villages, we can create a force that the rulers cannot ignore. With renewed determination, Jake extended his hand to Kelos. Let's work together. We will gather more allies and show them the strength of our unity. As the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Jake felt a sense of purpose wash over him. They were building something powerful, a community that could stand against their oppressors. With Kelos and the support of the neighboring villages, the fight for freedom was no longer a distant dream. It was becoming a reality. Together, they would rise against the rulers, armed with the skills they had honed and the strength of their unity. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Jake knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but with every step, they were one step closer to reclaiming their freedom. The desperate journey. The alien family had never thought they would be running for their lives. Their home planet, Zalora, was once a peaceful place filled with green fields and blue skies. The air was fresh, and the people lived happily. But that was before the Empire invaded. Now, they were just a small family trying to survive in a galaxy filled with danger. Koran, the father, had been a farmer. He loved working in the fields, planting seeds, and watching them grow. His wife, Ilara, was a healer known for her kind heart and gentle touch. They had 2 children, Lyra, a curious girl with bright eyes, and Taro, her little brother, who always wanted to be brave like his father. One night, everything changed. The Empire's ships darkened the sky, raining fire down on their village. Koran and Ilara grabbed their children and ran. They reached their small ship, an old model that had seen better days. As they lifted off, Koran looked back at their home, knowing they might never return. Their ship flew through the stars, but the Empire's ships were fast. They chased them, firing weapons that lit up the dark. Koran piloted the ship with all his strength, but their pursuers were relentless. They had to escape. Hold on, Koran shouted as he dodged the blasts. The ship shook, and the children clung to each other, eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, a blast hit their ship, and alarms blared. The controls sparked, and Koran struggled to keep the ship steady. We need to land, Ilara yelled, trying to keep her voice calm for the children. Corin scanned the nearby planets. There was one that looked less hostile, but it was known as Deathworld, a place where many adventurers had perished. With no other choice, Corin aimed for Deathworld. The ship descended rapidly, the ground rushing up to meet them. They crashed hard, tumbling across the rocky surface until they finally came to a stop. Dust filled the air, and the family was thrown around in the cockpit. As the dust settled, Corin quickly checked on his family. "Are you all okay?" he asked, his heart racing. Lyra and Taro nodded, still shaken. Ilara had a small cut on her arm, but she smiled at her children to reassure them. "We need to get out of here," Corin said, glancing out of the broken window. The landscape was barren and harsh, with jagged rocks and dark shadows. It felt alive, but not in a friendly way. "We don't know how long before the Empire finds us again." They crawled out of the wreckage, feeling the heat of Deathworld's sun on their skin. The air was thick and heavy, and the sky was a dull orange. Corin looked around. They were in a valley surrounded by steep cliffs. It was eerily quiet, and his instincts told him they were not alone. "We should find shelter," Ilara said, her healer instincts kicking in. "We need to tend to your wound, and the children need rest." Corin nodded. "Let's move away from the ship. We can't stay here." They began to walk, carefully making their way over the rocky ground. Lyra and Taro walked closely beside their parents, trying to stay brave. As they moved, Corin kept his eyes and ears open. The silence felt wrong. The stories he had heard about Deathworld flooded his mind. Dangerous creatures roamed here, beasts that could attack without warning. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes made them all freeze. Corin's heart raced. He turned to his family. "Stay close," he whispered. He took a few cautious steps toward the noise. A creature emerged from the bushes, tall and covered in dark fur. It had sharp claws and glowing eyes. Corin's stomach dropped as he realized they were staring at a predator. "Run," he shouted. The family sprinted away, adrenaline pushing them forward. Corin glanced back to see the creature chasing them, its powerful legs propelling it forward. They dashed up a small hill, trying to escape. Over there, Ilara pointed to a cave hidden behind a large rock. They dashed inside just in time, the creature skidding to a halt outside. Corin pushed a boulder in front of the entrance, blocking the way. Breathing heavily, the family huddled together in the dim light of the cave. Taro clung to Lyra, his small body trembling. "Are we safe, Daddy?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "For now," Corin replied, trying to sound brave. "But we can't stay here long. We need to figure out our next move." As they sat in the darkness, Corin's mind raced. He thought about how they had come to this strange, dangerous world. They had lost everything, and now they had to survive in a place where no one was safe. But as he looked at his family, he knew they had each other, and that was the most important thing. They were lost on Deathworld, but they would not give up. Together, they would find a way to survive. Corin promised himself he would protect his family, no matter the cost. The Cave of Secrets. The cave felt cold and dark, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the sun outside. Corin sat with his family, listening to the soft sounds of their breathing. The only light came from the small gaps in the rock above them, casting eerie shadows on the walls. They needed to find a way to survive, but for now, they had to rest. Ilara tended to her wound, using some cloth from her clothing to bandage her arm. "I'll be fine," she assured the children, her voice steady despite the pain. Corin watched her with admiration, grateful for her strength. "What do we do now?" Lyra asked, her eyes wide with worry. "Are we going to stay here forever?" Corin took a deep breath. "We can't stay here for long. The Empire will be looking for us. But we need to find food and water first." He glanced around the cave, searching for any signs of life. "We should explore a bit and see what this place has to offer." "Can I come with you?" Taro asked, his small face filled with determination. Corin smiled softly. "It's not safe out there, buddy. You need to stay with your mother. I'll be back soon." He patted Taro on the shoulder, trying to comfort him. With a nod, Corin stood up and made his way toward the cave entrance. He pushed the boulder aside carefully, peering out into the open. The sun was high in the sky, and the heat washed over him like a wave. He took a moment to gather his thoughts and then stepped outside, feeling the rocky ground beneath his feet. As he walked away from the cave, Corin scanned the area. The valley stretched out before him, filled with jagged rocks and sparse vegetation. He had heard that Deathworld was dangerous, but he also knew that life found a way to survive, even in harsh environments. He hoped he could find something to eat. He ventured a bit farther, looking for signs of life. A few small plants poked through the dirt, and he crouched down to examine them. They looked edible, but he needed to be careful. He picked a few leaves, placing them in a pocket of his clothing. As he stood up, he heard a noise behind him. Corin turned quickly, ready to defend himself. But instead of a predator, he saw a small creature, no bigger than Taro. It had bright blue fur and large, curious eyes. It sniffed the air, clearly intrigued by Corin's presence. He cautiously knelt down, not wanting to scare it away. "Hey there, little one," Corin said softly. The creature tilted its head, its ears twitching. Corin slowly reached out a hand, hoping to gain its trust. The creature took a few cautious steps closer, sniffing his fingers before nuzzling against them. Corin smiled, feeling a spark of hope. "Maybe you can help me," he whispered. The creature seemed to understand, looking back toward the valley before darting off into the bushes. Corin quickly followed, curious about where it might lead him. They ran through the rocks and bushes, the little creature moving quickly and effortlessly. Corin felt his spirits lift as he followed. After a short while, they arrived at a small stream. The water flowed clear and fresh, sparkling in the sunlight. Corin knelt beside it, cupping his hands to take a drink. It tasted cool and refreshing, washing away some of his worries. He turned to the creature, who was now sitting by the water, watching him with its big eyes. "Thank you," Corin said, smiling. He filled his pocket with more leaves and gathered some small stones that could be used as tools. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed movement in the bushes nearby. His heart raced as he turned to see a larger creature emerge. This one was tall and covered in tough scales, its eyes glowing with a fierce intelligence. Corin quickly backed away, realizing this was a predator. The creature locked eyes with him, sizing him up. Corin's mind raced, searching for a way to escape. But the little blue creature rushed between them, chattering loudly as if trying to protect him. Corin watched in shock as the predator paused, seemingly confused by the smaller creature's behavior. "Stay back," Corin shouted, ready to fight if needed. But to his surprise, the larger creature lowered its head, showing no signs of aggression. It seemed to understand that the little one was not a threat. Corin held his breath, unsure of what would happen next. The blue creature continued to chatter and dance around, and gradually, the larger creature relaxed. Corin's heart calmed as he realized he might have found an unexpected ally in this dangerous world. If these two creatures could coexist, maybe he could learn to navigate this place. Feeling hopeful, Corin decided to return to his family. He needed to tell them about the water source and the strange creatures he had met. He turned to follow the little creature, who was still eager to guide him back to the cave. As they approached the cave entrance, Corin felt a rush of excitement. He couldn't wait to share the good news with Ilara and the children. They would have water and food, and with a little luck, they might be able to survive. Inside, he found his family waiting anxiously. Lyra looked up, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Did you find something?" she asked eagerly. "Yes, there's a stream not far from here," Corin replied, feeling proud. "And I met a couple of creatures. They seem friendly." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that? We need to be careful." "I think we can trust them," Corin said, determined. But we need to stay alert. We're not safe yet." He shared his findings with them, and a sense of relief washed over the family. For the first time since their escape, they felt a glimmer of hope. As night began to fall, Corin and his family gathered their supplies and prepared for the next day. They would need to learn how to survive in this harsh world together. And together, they would find a way to make a new home, even on Deathworld. "You said, the Alliance." The morning sun crept into the cave, casting soft rays of light that danced across the rocky floor. Corin woke first, feeling the sense of purpose. Today, he would take his family to the stream and introduce them to the blue creature he had befriended. They needed allies, especially in such a dangerous place. As he stirred, Ilara woke up beside him. "What's the plan for today?" she asked, stretching her arms. Her face was calm, but Corin could see the worry in her eyes. "We're going to the stream. I found some food and water, and I want you and the kids to see it," Corin replied, his voice steady. "And I want you to meet the creatures I saw." Ilara nodded, looking relieved. "That sounds good. It will help the children feel safer." She gently shook Taro and Lyra awake, sharing the plan with them. Their eyes sparkled with excitement, their previous fears momentarily forgotten. After a quick breakfast of gathered leaves, they set out toward the stream. Corin led the way, with Taro clinging to his side, and Lyra skipping ahead. Ilara followed closely behind, keeping an eye on both children. As they approached the stream, Corin felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Would the little blue creature still be there? Would the larger predator be lurking nearby? He shook off his doubts, focusing on the journey ahead. When they reached the water, Corin smiled. The little blue creature was waiting for them, perched on a rock and watching them with its bright eyes. Corin waved, and it responded by hopping excitedly, chattering happily. "Look, Mom, it's so cute," Taro exclaimed, rushing toward the creature. The little creature darted away playfully, encouraging Taro to chase after it. Lyra laughed, her worries fading as she joined her brother in the chase. Ilara watched, a smile forming on her lips. "It seems to like them," she said, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. Corin knelt beside the stream, cupping his hands to drink from the clear water. As he looked up, he spotted the larger creature at the edge of the water, its eyes fixed on the playful duo. Panic surged through him, but to his surprise, the predator appeared calm, its body relaxed. "Everyone, be careful," Corin called out, standing up quickly. But the little blue creature ran back, playfully bumping against the larger one. It seemed to be trying to reassure Corin that it was safe. The larger creature lowered its head, and the blue one began to nuzzle it affectionately. Corin watched in awe. This was not what he expected from a predator. Maybe they could coexist in this strange land. "Look, Corin, they're friends," Lyra shouted, her eyes wide with wonder. "Yes, they seem to be," Corin agreed, feeling a flicker of hope. "Maybe we can work together." He walked closer to the larger creature, his heart pounding. He remembered how the blue creature had protected him before, and now it seemed like the predator was no longer a threat. Corin extended his hand slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. To his surprise, the larger creature sniffed his hand gently, its eyes curious yet cautious. Corin's breath caught in his throat as he felt the warm breath of the creature against his skin. "It's okay," he whispered, trying to sound calm. "I won't hurt you." As the creature relaxed, Corin felt a connection forming. He glanced back at his family, who were watching in awe. Ilara smiled, her fear slowly fading. This moment was important. They were building an alliance with the creatures of Deathworld. Suddenly, the blue creature darted off, grabbing a piece of food it had stashed earlier. It returned to Corin, dropping the small item at his feet. Corin looked down, recognizing it as a type of fruit. It was slightly shriveled but still edible. "Is this for me?" Corin asked, bending down to pick it up. The blue creature bounced around excitedly, clearly pleased with itself. Corin smiled, feeling grateful for the small gesture. "Thank you, little one," he said, holding the fruit up for everyone to see. "We have food now. This is a great start to our day." Lyra clapped her hands, her eyes shining. "Can we eat it?" she asked eagerly. "Let's share it and see if we can find more," Corin replied. They gathered around the stream, picking small pieces of the fruit to share. The sweet taste filled their mouths, a welcome relief from the worry they had carried with them. As they ate, Corin felt a newfound strength. They were not alone anymore. They had made friends in this dangerous land, and together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. After their meal, Corin took his family back to the cave. The day had brought unexpected joy, but they still needed to be cautious. They would have to plan for the future and think about what the Empire would do next. That night, as they sat together in the cave, Corin knew they had taken the first step toward building a new life. They were not just survivors. They were becoming part of something greater. Together, they would create a home on Deathworld, with friends who would stand by them in the face of danger. Corin looked at Ilara and the kids, their faces lit by the soft glow of a small fire. He felt grateful for their strength and resilience. No matter what challenges came their way, they would face them as a family, united and strong. You said, the first test. The following days on Deathworld were both thrilling and terrifying. Corin and his family were beginning to feel more comfortable in their cave, but they knew danger was always close. They spent their mornings exploring the nearby areas, gathering food, and learning about their new friends, the blue creature and its larger companion. One bright morning, Corin decided it was time for a real test. He gathered Ilara, Taro, and Lyra around the small fire they had made. "We need to find a way to protect ourselves and build a safe path for others who might come here," he said, his voice steady. "I want us to explore deeper into the forest. We can look for more food and maybe find a safer spot for us." Ilara nodded, concern etched on her face. "What if we encounter more predators?" she asked, glancing at the cave entrance. Corin put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "That's why we'll stick together. And we have our friends. The larger creature has been protective of us. If we see it, we can trust that it will help us." Taro and Lyra's faces lit up with excitement. "Can we see the big creature again?" Taro asked eagerly. "Of course, but we need to be careful," Corin replied, leading them out of the cave. They stepped into the bright sunlight, the sounds of the forest filling the air. Birds chirped, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them. As they made their way through the trees, Corin kept his eyes open for any signs of danger. They walked for a while, following the blue creature, who led them with a playful bounce. It darted ahead, exploring the underbrush, and then returning to check on them. "Stay close," Corin instructed, watching Taro and Lyra run ahead. They were filled with energy and curiosity. Ilara stayed close to Corin, her eyes scanning the area for any movement. Suddenly, the little blue creature paused, its ears perked up. It stared into the bushes, its body tense. Corin's heart raced. "What is it?" he whispered, holding his breath. Before anyone could respond, a loud rustling came from the nearby thicket. Corin's instinct kicked in, and he quickly pulled Ilara and the children closer to him. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. Out of the bushes, a small group of strange creatures emerged. They were about the size of Taro, but had long tails and brightly colored scales. Their eyes were wide and curious as they looked at Corin and his family. The blue creature bounced forward, chattering loudly. "What are those?" Ilara whispered, her grip tightening on Corin's arm. "I don't know," Corin replied, keeping his voice low. "But we need to be ready." He remembered the larger creature and hoped it was nearby. The scaled creatures approached slowly, their movements cautious but friendly. The blue creature seemed to communicate with them, hopping around and chattering excitedly. Corin watched, unsure of what would happen next. After a few tense moments, the scaled creatures began to mimic the blue creature, chirping back and dancing around. Taro's face lit up with joy. "Look, Dad. They want to play." Corin relaxed slightly, sensing that the creatures meant no harm. "Okay, but let's stay alert," he reminded his family. The scaled creatures seemed to want to lead them somewhere, and the blue creature encouraged Corin and his family to follow. They moved together, with the little blue creature leading the way and the scaled ones flanking the family. After a short walk, they arrived at a clearing filled with strange plants and bright flowers. Corin's heart lifted at the sight. This place was full of potential food sources. Ilara gasped, "Look at all the colors. It's beautiful." She bent down to examine a flower. Taro and Lyra giggled as they played with the bright petals. Corin smiled, feeling a sense of relief. "We can gather some of this," he said, pointing to a large bush filled with colorful fruits. "It will be perfect for us." As they began to pick the fruits, the scaled creatures observed them closely. They seemed curious about Corin and his family, often tilting their heads as if trying to understand what the humans were doing. After a while, Corin noticed the blue creature getting restless. It began to hop around excitedly again, leading the scaled creatures in playful circles. Corin couldn't help but laugh. "They really enjoy playing," he said, watching the scene unfold. Suddenly, the sound of rustling leaves interrupted the laughter. Corin's instincts flared again. "Everyone, stay close," he shouted, turning to face the direction of the noise. From the bushes emerged a creature much larger than the ones they had seen. It had sharp claws and a sleek body. Its eyes locked onto Corin and his family. The larger creature emitted a low growl, causing Taro and Lyra to cling to Ilara. Corin stepped forward, determined not to show fear. The blue creature rushed to his side, chattering frantically. To Corin's surprise, the scaled creatures formed a protective barrier around his family, facing the approaching predator. "Stay behind us," one of the scaled creatures seemed to say, using its body language to shield Corin's family. Corin's heart raced, but he realized they were not alone. They had allies in this dangerous world. The larger predator approached cautiously, its eyes darting between Corin and the scaled creatures. Corin could see the tension in its muscles, ready to strike if necessary. The blue creature hopped forward, still chattering, and began to dance around the larger creature, drawing its attention. The predator hesitated, confusion in its eyes. It seemed to recognize the little blue creature, which made Corin's heart pound with hope. After a tense moment, the larger creature relaxed slightly, lowering its head. The scaled creatures continued to hold their ground, ready to protect Corin's family if necessary. Then, in an unexpected turn, the blue creature nudged the larger one, urging it to play. The larger creature let out a low growl, but Corin could see its demeanor change. It lowered itself to the ground, joining the playful antics of the little blue creature. Corin's eyes widened in disbelief. "It's playing," he whispered, glancing at Ilara, who looked equally shocked. "Yes," Ilara breathed, astonished. The tension slowly faded from the clearing as the larger creature and the blue one danced around each other. Corin felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had faced a terrifying challenge together, and in this moment, they were united as a family, with their new allies at their side. "Maybe we can find a way to coexist," Corin said, watching the scene unfold. He felt a flicker of hope for their future on Deathworld. Together with their new friends, they could create a home in this wild and dangerous land. The bonding. The days that followed their encounter with the larger creature were filled with excitement and discovery. Corin, Ilara, Taro, and Lyra had become more comfortable with their new lives on Deathworld. They explored deeper into the forest, foraging for food and learning from the blue creature and its scaled companions. One sunny morning, as they sat around the fire in their cave, Corin shared his plan. "We need to build a better home," he said, looking at his family. "This cave is nice, but it can be improved. We can make it safer and more comfortable." Ilara nodded eagerly. "What do you have in mind?" Corin thought for a moment. "We can use branches and leaves to create walls. We can also gather more materials from the forest to strengthen the entrance. If we make it more secure, we can invite our new friends to stay with us." Taro's eyes lit up. "Can we invite the blue creature and its friends? They help us so much." "Yes, we can," Corin agreed, smiling. "They have become part of our family, and we should show them that we appreciate their help." With a plan in place, Corin, Ilara, Taro, and Lyra gathered their tools and set out into the forest. They worked tirelessly throughout the day, cutting branches and gathering leaves. The blue creature and the scaled beings joined in, using their unique abilities to help. The blue creature zipped around, collecting small twigs and foliage, while the scaled beings used their strong tails to help lift heavier materials. Together, they worked as a team, communicating through playful gestures and chirps. As the sun began to set, they had built a sturdy structure around the cave entrance. Corin felt a sense of pride swell within him. "Look at what we've created together," he said, beaming at his family and their friends. Taro jumped up and down, full of energy. "It's awesome. Now we can all stay safe." Lyra giggled and added, "And we can have more adventures." Ilara looked at Corin, her eyes shining with happiness. "You've brought us all together. This is our home now." After their hard work, they gathered around the fire to celebrate. Corin cooked some fruits they had collected, and the smell filled the cave. They shared stories, laughing and enjoying each other's company. The blue creature and the scaled beings watched curiously, occasionally joining in with playful movements. As the fire crackled, Corin felt grateful. They had formed a bond with the creatures of Deathworld. This place was dangerous, but it was also full of wonder. One night, as they sat by the fire, a strange sound echoed through the trees. It was a deep rumble, like thunder, but there were no clouds in the sky. Corin's heart raced as he looked at Ilara. "What was that?" "I don't know," she replied, glancing at the cave entrance. Taro and Lyra huddled close to their parents, wide-eyed with fear. The blue creature perked up, its ears twitching. It hopped to the entrance and began to chirp loudly, calling for the scaled creatures. "They can sense something," Corin whispered, his heart pounding. He felt a sudden urgency to understand what was happening. Suddenly, the scaled creatures rushed into the cave, their bodies tense. One of them pointed its tail toward the direction of the sound. Corin could see the concern in their eyes. "Let's go check it out," Corin said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "But we need to stick together." Ilara nodded, taking Taro and Lyra's hands. The family moved cautiously toward the cave entrance, the blue creature leading the way. They stepped outside into the cool night air, where the moonlight illuminated the forest. The rumbling sound grew louder, vibrating through the ground. Corin felt a shiver run down his spine. He looked around, trying to find the source. Then, out of the shadows, a massive figure emerged. It was a creature unlike anything Corin had ever seen. Tall and covered in thick, scaly skin. Its eyes glowed a bright orange, and it moved with a grace that belied its size. Corin's breath caught in his throat. "What is that?" he whispered, clutching Ilara's hand tightly. The blue creature squeaked and moved closer, seemingly unafraid. It started to bounce around the massive creature, chirping excitedly. The scaled beings looked uncertain but stayed close to Corin's family, ready to defend them if necessary. As the massive creature turned its gaze toward them, Corin could see a flicker of intelligence in its eyes. It lowered its head slightly, studying Corin and his family. "Maybe it's not hostile," Corin said, feeling a strange sense of connection to the creature. "It could be another ally." With a mix of fear and hope, Corin took a step forward, slowly raising his hand in a gesture of peace. "We come in friendship," he said softly, his voice steady. The massive creature tilted its head, as if trying to understand. The blue creature jumped between them, making playful noises, encouraging the larger creature to approach. After a moment of hesitation, the massive creature took a tentative step forward, its eyes locked on Corin. It sniffed the air, and Corin held his breath. Would it accept them? Then, with a low rumble, the massive creature crouched down, bringing its head closer to Corin's level. Corin felt a rush of excitement. "I think it's friendly," he exclaimed, glancing back at Ilara and the kids. Ilara smiled, relief washing over her face. "It looks curious," she said. Taro and Lyra giggled, stepping forward to get a better look. The blue creature danced around the giant, making it seem more at ease. Corin took another cautious step, reaching out his hand. The massive creature sniffed at Corin's palm, and he felt a thrill of joy at this new connection. In that moment, Corin realized that their family had grown even larger. Deathworld was still a dangerous place, but they had found allies in the blue creature, the scaled beings, and now this enormous, gentle giant. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the night deepened, Corin, Ilara, Taro, Lyra, and their new friends gathered around the fire once more. They shared stories and laughter, their hearts filled with hope. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. In this wild, unpredictable world, they had found each other, and together, they could face anything. The gathering storm. The next few days passed quickly, filled with laughter, exploration, and bonding. Corin, Ilara, Taro, Lyra, the blue creature, and their newfound giant friend, who they named Grath, worked together to strengthen their home. Grath helped gather materials, using its powerful limbs to lift heavy branches and stones, while the scaled creatures taught the family how to forage safely. One sunny afternoon, as the group rested near their cave, Taro noticed something unusual in the sky. "Look," he shouted, pointing upward. "What's that?" The others looked up and saw dark clouds swirling on the horizon. Corin's heart sank. He had learned enough about Deathworld to know that storms here could be fierce and unpredictable. "We need to prepare," he said, his voice firm. "Let's gather everything we can before it arrives." Ilara nodded, her expression serious. "We should secure the cave and gather food. We may need to wait out the storm inside." With a sense of urgency, they sprang into action. Taro and Lyra helped gather fruits and vegetables, while Corin and Ilara reinforced the entrance of their cave with extra branches and leaves. Grath and the scaled creatures worked together, moving large rocks to create a sturdy barrier. As they worked, Corin glanced at the sky. The clouds were darkening rapidly, and the wind began to pick up, rustling the leaves overhead. He felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. "We need to hurry," he urged, picking up the pace. Just as they finished securing the entrance, the first drops of rain began to fall. It started as a light drizzle, but within moments, it turned into a heavy downpour. The sound of rain hitting the ground echoed through the forest, drowning out all other noises. "Inside. Everyone inside," Corin shouted, ushering his family and their friends into the cave. They huddled together, listening to the storm rage outside. The wind howled, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Ilara wrapped her arms around Taro and Lyra, trying to comfort them. "It's okay, we're safe here," she whispered. Corin watched as Grath curled up protectively at the entrance, keeping a watchful eye on the storm. The blue creature nestled close to Grath, seeming unbothered by the chaos outside. Hours passed, and the storm continued to rage. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cave in eerie bursts. Corin could feel the tension in the air. The storm was unlike anything they had experienced since arriving on Deathworld. As the rain poured, Corin began to worry about their surroundings. "What if the river overflows?" he asked Ilara, his voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. "What if the cave floods?" Ilara nodded, her brow furrowed with concern. "We need to be ready to leave quickly if that happens." Just then, a loud crash echoed from outside, shaking the ground beneath them. Taro and Lyra jumped, clinging to their mother. Corin's heart raced as he glanced at the entrance. What was that? The blue creature chirped nervously, darting to Corin's side. Grath stood up, its massive frame silhouetted against the cave entrance. The storm continued to howl, but Graf seemed unfazed, ready to protect its new family. Suddenly, the cave trembled again, and a deep rumbling noise filled the air. Corin realized that the storm was not just a storm, it was a disaster in the making. "We need to check outside," he shouted over the noise. "Are you sure?" Ilara asked, her eyes wide with fear. "What if it's dangerous?" Corin nodded firmly. "We have to know what's happening. We can't stay here without knowing if it's safe." Gathering his courage, Corin moved toward the entrance. The wind whipped through the cave, and he braced himself against the storm. Graf stepped beside him, ready to protect him from any threat. Corin pushed aside the makeshift barrier and stepped outside, his heart pounding in his chest. The rain lashed against him, and he squinted through the sheets of water. The forest was in chaos. Trees swayed violently, and debris flew through the air. As Corin surveyed the scene, he saw that the river had swelled dramatically. "We need to warn everyone," he yelled, turning back to the cave. "It's too dangerous. We have to move to higher ground." Ilara, Taro, and Lyra followed him out, with Graf and the blue creature close behind. The scaled beings also emerged, their bodies tense and alert. Together, they faced the storm, determination written on their faces. "Which way should we go?" Ilara shouted over the wind. Corin scanned the area, searching for a safe path. "We can head toward the cliffs," he called back, pointing to the high ground in the distance. "If we climb, we'll be safer." With a shared sense of purpose, they moved as one, making their way through the storm. The rain soaked them to the bone, but they pressed on, helping each other over fallen branches and debris. As they approached the cliffs, Corin could see that the river was rising quickly. They had to hurry. Graf led the way, its large body navigating through the chaos with ease. The blue creature bounced alongside, chirping encouragement. Finally, they reached the base of the cliffs. Corin looked up, the rocky surface looming above them. "We have to climb," he shouted. One by one, they began to ascend the cliffs, using the crevices to find their footing. The storm continued to rage, but Corin felt a sense of hope. They were a family, a team, and together they could face anything. As they climbed higher, Corin glanced back at the river. The waters were rising faster than he had imagined, and he felt a shiver run down his spine. "Keep going. We're almost there," he urged. With one final push, they reached a ledge high above the chaos below. They huddled together, catching their breath as the storm raged on. From their vantage point, they could see the devastation the storm was causing. Trees were falling, and the river had overflowed its banks, flooding the valley. But they were safe. Corin looked around at his family and friends, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. They had faced the storm together, and they would continue to face whatever came next. As the storm began to weaken, Corin took a moment to appreciate the strength of their bond. They had come so far on this dangerous world, and they would keep moving forward, no matter the challenges ahead. A new beginning. The storm finally began to subside, the rain tapering off into a gentle drizzle. Corin stood on the ledge, looking out over the landscape below. The devastation was clear. The river had flooded large areas, and trees lay strewn about like matchsticks. But there was also a sense of renewal in the air, a promise of a fresh start. As the clouds parted, the sun broke through, casting a warm glow on everything it touched. Corin felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had weathered the storm together, and now they had a chance to rebuild. "Is everyone okay?" Corin asked, turning to his family and friends. Ilara nodded, brushing rain-soaked hair from her face. "We're fine, just a little shaken. What do we do next?" Corin thought for a moment. "We need to scout the area. Let's see what we can find. Any supplies, a safe place to settle, or even survivors from the storm." With a shared sense of determination, they began to descend the cliffs carefully. Graf took the lead, ensuring everyone stayed safe on their way down. The blue creature followed closely behind, its tiny body full of energy, chirping happily now that the worst of the storm was over. As they reached the ground, Corin felt a sense of purpose drive him forward. They needed to find a new home. The forest was different now, reshaped by the storm, but it still held promise. The group moved cautiously through the landscape. Corin took note of the fallen trees. Some were still sturdy enough to provide shelter, while others would be useful for building. Lyra spotted a cluster of colorful fruits hanging from a nearby bush. "Look, we can gather food," she exclaimed. Taro and Ilara joined Lyra, collecting the fruits and placing them in a makeshift bag they had fashioned from leaves. Meanwhile, Corin and the scaled creatures began assessing the area for potential shelter. They came across a large fallen tree that had created a natural arch, forming a cave-like space. "This could work," Corin said, gesturing for everyone to come over. "It's protected from the elements, and we can build a barrier in front to keep us safe." Ilara examined the space, nodding in agreement. "It's perfect. We can use branches and vines to reinforce it." With renewed energy, they got to work. Taro and Lyra helped gather materials while Corin and Ilara focused on shaping the entrance. Graf stood guard, keeping watch for any threats that might emerge from the dense forest. As they worked, Corin couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie growing among them. They were no longer just a family. They were a team, united by their experiences and challenges. Each person brought their strengths, and together, they were creating something new. After a few hours of hard work, they stood back to admire their creation. The fallen tree was now reinforced with branches and leaves, forming a sturdy shelter. The space inside was warm and inviting, a sanctuary from the outside world. "This is home," Ilara said, smiling at Corin. As night fell, they gathered inside, grateful for the shelter. The gentle sound of rain began again, but they felt safe within their new home. They shared stories, laughter, and food, their spirits high despite the day's challenges. Corin felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had survived the storm and found a place to call home. But as he looked at the faces of his family and friends, he realized that the journey was far from over. Deathworld was still full of dangers and uncertainties, but together they could face anything. "Tomorrow, we'll explore more," Corin announced, glancing around the group. "We need to know what's out there and how we can survive." Lyra's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I want to see what else we can find. Maybe we'll discover new fruits or even new friends." The group nodded in agreement, their faces brightening at the prospect of new adventures. As they settled in for the night, Corin reflected on how far they had come. They had faced trials and triumphs, and each step had brought them closer together. They had formed bonds that could not be easily broken. Corin knew that, whatever awaited them in the days to come, they would face it together. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. As he closed his eyes, he felt a sense of hope swell within him. This was just the beginning of their journey on Deathworld, and together they would thrive.